Millionaire shocked to see his childhood love, begging with her baby. But what he did next was shocking. On a frost-bitten evening in Manhattan, fate was about to remind Gabriel Castellanos that the past never truly stays buried. He couldn't have known, as he stood there in his perfectly tailored Armani suit, that the next 60 seconds would shatter his carefully constructed world. The merger documents in his briefcase, the ones that had just made him another billion, would soon seem as meaningless as the snowflakes melting on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue. Because sometimes life waits for the perfect moment to bring your greatest regret right to your doorstep, and this moment was about to leave one of New York's most powerful men completely defenseless. Drop a comment below and let us know. Have you ever had a moment that changed your entire life in just seconds? And don't forget to like and subscribe to hear what happens next in this incredible story. The bitter December wind whipped through Manhattan's steel canyons as Gabriel raised his hand to call his driver. His Italian leather shoes gleamed against the rain-slicked pavement, while the neon signs of Le Bernardin cast red and gold reflections in the puddles at his feet. That's when fate decided to tear his perfectly ordered world apart. The bitter December wind whipped through Manhattan's steel canyons as Gabriel raised his hand to call his driver. His Italian leather shoes gleamed against the rain-slicked pavement, while the neon signs of Le Bernardin cast red and gold reflections in the puddles at his feet. That's when fate decided to tear his perfectly ordered world apart. Time slowed. The city noise faded. Through the falling snow, his eyes locked onto a figure huddled against the cold stone wall, her long dark hair falling over her face like a veil. A cardboard sign rested against her knees. "Please help. We have nothing left." But it wasn't the sign that made his heart stop beating. It was her face. Even through the shadows and time, he would know those eyes anywhere. Adelaide Wright. The woman he had once promised forever to was sitting on frozen concrete, clutching a baby to her chest while he stood in his $3,000 suit with keys to his Mercedes heavy in his pocket. 10 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled in an instant. Gabriel's fingers tightened around his phone until his knuckles turned white. The distance between them was only a few feet, but it might as well have been an ocean. His mind raced with memories of summer nights and whispered promises, of a small-town love that was supposed to last forever. Now here they were, separated by more than just the cold winter air between them. He took one step forward, then another. Adelaide's head snapped up, her tired eyes widening with recognition. But instead of relief, Gabriel saw something that chilled him more than the winter wind-pure, unbridled fear. She clutched the baby tighter and began to scramble to her feet, her movements desperate and panicked. What Gabriel didn't know then was that this wasn't just a chance encounter with a lost love. This was the beginning of a dangerous game, and somewhere in the shadows of Manhattan, someone was watching them both. Gabriel crouched down, ignoring the wetness seeping through his designer pants. "Adelaide," he whispered, the name feeling both foreign and achingly familiar on his tongue. She flinched at the sound of her own name, her eyes darting past him to scan the crowded street. "You need to leave," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The baby stirred against her chest, letting out a tiny whimper that seemed to echo in the space between them. Adelaide's hands trembled as she tried to soothe the infant, her cracked fingers red from the cold. "Please, Gabriel, just pretend you never saw me." But Gabriel wasn't moving. The successful businessman who commanded boardrooms with a single glance was gone, replaced by something more primal, a protector seeing someone he once loved in danger. He noticed things now that his initial shock had faded, the fading bruise near her temple, poorly concealed by her matted hair. The way she seemed to make herself smaller, as if trying to disappear into the wall behind her. The expensive wedding ring that should have been on her finger replaced by a band of pale, scarred skin. "Who did this to you?" The words came out like ice, sharp and cold. Adelaide's eyes welled with tears, but she shook her head frantically. The baby began to cry in earnest now, its wails drawing the attention of passing shoppers who quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. Gabriel reached out slowly, offering his hand. "Let me help you," he said softly. Whatever you're running from." He didn't finish the sentence, because at that moment Adelaide's eyes fixed on something over his shoulder, and the color drained from her face. Her next words came out in a terrified whisper that would haunt Gabriel's dreams for years to come. "They found me." The next few seconds moved in slow motion. Gabriel turned, his businessman's instincts instantly assessing the threat. 3 men in dark suits were moving through the crowd with practiced precision, their eyes locked on Adelaide. They didn't look like common thugs. These were professionals, the kind that made people disappear without leaving traces. Without hesitation, Gabriel slipped off his cashmere coat and wrapped it around Adelaide and the baby in one fluid motion. "Trust me," he murmured, helping her to her feet. Her legs wobbled, weeks of malnutrition evident in her unsteady stance. The baby, sensing its mother's fear, had gone eerily quiet. Gabriel's mind raced through his options. His Mercedes was parked around the corner, but they'd be seen. The restaurant's kitchen entrance was too far. The men were closing in, their practiced movements reminiscent of wolves cornering prey. Then he felt it. The keycard in his pocket for the private elevator to Le Bernardin's exclusive upper floor, where he held his most sensitive business meetings. "Hold on to me," he ordered quietly, his arm sliding around Adelaide's waist. To any passerby, they looked like a wealthy couple heading to dinner, the baby nestled between them. But Gabriel could feel Adelaide's rapid heartbeat, could sense the men getting closer. They were 15 feet from the restaurant's side entrance, 10 feet, 5. Just as Gabriel reached for the door, a deep voice cut through the winter air. "Miss Wright." The words carried no emotion, yet promised volumes of violence. "Mr. Blackwood would like a word." The name sent a visible shudder through Adelaide's body. Gabriel felt her fingers dig into his arm with desperate strength. And in that moment he realized this wasn't just about saving a woman from the streets. He had just stepped into a war with one of the most dangerous men in New York City. Gabriel's fingers tightened around his keycard as he turned to face the speaker. The man in the center stood slightly forward of his companions, his dead-eyed stare and perfect posture marking him as ex-military. The winter crowd parted around them like water around stones, instinctively sensing the danger. "I don't believe Miss Wright is interested in any conversations right now," Gabriel replied, his voice carrying the same steel that had built his empire. He felt Adelaide press closer to him, the baby completely silent now, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. The lead man's lip twitched. Not quite a smile, more like a predator's warning. "Mr. Castellanos," the man said, recognition flickering in his cold eyes. "This matter doesn't concern you. Step aside." The subtle shift of his jacket revealed the glint of a shoulder holster. The message was clear. This wasn't a negotiation. But they had made one critical mistake. They thought they were dealing with the polished businessman from the society pages. They didn't know about the street fighter who had clawed his way up from nothing, who had learned to recognize threats before they materialized. As the leader took another step forward, Gabriel's free hand slid into his pocket, pressing a single button on his phone. Suddenly, the private entrance behind them beeped and opened. In the same instant, 2 black SUVs screeched to a halt at the curb, disgorging men in dark suits. Gabriel's own security team summoned by his panic button. The power balance shifted instantly. "Actually," Gabriel said quietly, backing through the door with Adelaide, "I think this matter concerns me very much." The door sealed shut behind them with a heavy click, leaving them in the dimly lit private corridor. But even as Adelaide let out a shaky breath of relief, Gabriel knew this was just the beginning. Because he had just declared war on Malcolm Blackwood, and the man's reputation for vengeance was legendary. Through the bulletproof glass he could see Blackwood's men retreating, melting into the crowd. But the look the leader gave him before disappearing sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Inside the private elevator, Adelaide's legs finally gave out. Gabriel caught her before she could fall, cradling both her and the baby against his chest. The infant stirred, making tiny distressed sounds that echoed in the confined space. "You shouldn't have done that," Adelaide whispered, her voice breaking. "You don't know what he's capable of." Her fingers clutched the lapels of his suit jacket, leaving wrinkles in the expensive fabric. "Malcolm Blackwood, he doesn't stop. Ever." The elevator climbed smoothly to the top floor as Gabriel's mind processed the name. Malcolm Blackwood. The man whose real estate empire was built on blood money, whose charity galas were attended by politicians and criminals alike. The same man who'd been investigated for multiple disappearances but never charged. "What does he want with you?" Gabriel asked softly, watching Adelaide's face in the elevator's dim lighting. The bruise near her temple looked darker now, a violent testament to whatever hell she'd escaped from. Adelaide looked down at her baby, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep. "My husband," she started, then stopped, swallowing hard. "Thomas. He worked for Malcolm. Started as just real estate deals, but then—" Her voice trailed off as the elevator doors opened to Gabriel's private floor. He led her into the secure room, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the glittering city below. Adelaide sank into a leather chair, still holding her baby close. When she looked up at Gabriel, her eyes held a mixture of terror and resignation. "Thomas is dead," she whispered. "And the USB drive he hid, the one that could destroy Malcolm's entire empire, Blackwood thinks I have it." She touched her sleeping baby's cheek with trembling fingers. "That's why he'll never stop hunting us." Gabriel's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number flashed on the screen. "You have something that belongs to me. Last chance to return it." As he looked from the message to Adelaide and her baby, Gabriel realized he had just become entangled in something far more dangerous than a chance reunion with a lost love. Gabriel's security team quietly filed into the room, their presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the danger they faced. He watched as one of them drew the bulletproof blinds while another swept the room for surveillance devices. Adelaide's eyes followed their movements, her body tensing with each new person who entered. "The perimeter is secure, sir," his head of security, Martinez, reported in low tones. "But there's something you need to see." He handed Gabriel a tablet, its screen displaying traffic camera footage from the street below. Black SUVs had taken up strategic positions around the building. They were being watched. Adelaide's baby stirred, letting out a hungry cry that cut through the tension. "Her name is Emma," Adelaide said softly, rocking the infant. "She hasn't eaten in—" Her voice cracked, shame and exhaustion written across her face. Gabriel immediately began issuing orders. "Get food sent up, and baby supplies, everything." He paused, watching Adelaide try to soothe Emma. "And find Dr. Chen. Tell her it's urgent." His team moved swiftly, their efficiency born from years of handling delicate situations. But as the room cleared, leaving them alone again, Adelaide's words from earlier hung heavy in the air. A USB drive that could destroy Blackwood's empire. A dead husband, a mother, and baby on the run. The pieces were starting to form a deadly puzzle. "Tell me about the drive," Gabriel said, sitting across from her. "What's on it?" Adelaide's eyes darted to the windows as if expecting to see snipers in the buildings across the street. "Everything," she whispered. "Every illegal deal, every bribe, every—" She shuddered. "Every person who disappeared after crossing him. Thomas was his accountant. He kept records of everything." Gabriel's phone buzzed again. Another message. "Tick-tock, Mr. Castellanos. Her husband made his choice. Don't make his mistake." As he read it, the lights in the entire building suddenly went dark, and emergency sirens began to wail. In the sudden darkness, Gabriel's security training kicked in. He moved swiftly to Adelaide, shielding both her and Emma with his body as red emergency lights bathed the room in an eerie glow. The baby's frightened cries pierced the chaos while backup generators hummed to life. "They cut the main power," Martinez's voice crackled through Gabriel's earpiece. "Sir, we've got movement in the service stairwell, multiple hostiles. They're using the blackout as cover." Adelaide clutched Emma closer, her breath coming in short gasps. "The USB," she whispered urgently. "It's not with me. Thomas. He hid it before they—" Her voice broke. "The night they killed him, he told me where it was. That's why Blackwood can't just eliminate me. He needs the information." Gabriel's mind raced, years of business strategy merging with pure survival instinct. The building's security systems were compromised, which meant someone on the inside had helped Blackwood's men. They were trapped on the top floor with hostile forces moving up from below. "Martinez, initiate Protocol Echo," Gabriel commanded. In the dim light, he pulled Adelaide to her feet, guiding her toward a seemingly solid wall. "You're not the only one with secrets," he told her softly, pressing his palm against a hidden scanner. The wall slid open silently, revealing a narrow escape corridor. But just as they moved toward it, Gabriel's private elevator pinged. Someone was overriding the security lockdown. Through the glass doors, they could see the car ascending, filled with dark figures. Adelaide's grip on his arm tightened painfully. "That's him," she breathed, terror making her voice shake. "Malcolm never sends others to finish what he starts. He comes himself." As the elevator continued its climb, Gabriel realized they had seconds to make an impossible choice: face Malcolm Blackwood and his men, or risk the uncertain escape route that could either lead to freedom or be another trap entirely. "Into the passage. Now." Gabriel's command was barely a whisper as he guided Adelaide and Emma into the hidden corridor. Just before the wall panel slid shut, they caught a glimpse of the elevator doors opening. Malcolm Blackwood stepped out, his silver hair gleaming in the emergency lights, his expensive suit immaculate despite the chaos. The passage was narrow, lit by dim blue strips along the floor. Adelaide stumbled forward, exhaustion making her steps unsteady. Emma, sensing her mother's fear, had gone eerily quiet again. Behind them, muffled voices leaked through the walls. Then, Blackwood's cultured tone cut through clearly. "Find them. He has a secret exit somewhere. This building was designed for escape." They moved faster, Gabriel's hand steady on Adelaide's back. The passage sloped downward, leading them through the building's hidden spine. But as they reached a junction point, Adelaide suddenly stopped. "Wait," she gasped, her face pale in the blue light. "Thomas, he said something else that night, about Blackwood's personal safe in his office." Her eyes met Gabriel's, filled with desperate hope. "The drive isn't the only copy. There's another one, hidden in plain sight. That's why Blackwood's here himself. He's not just hunting us." Gabriel's earpiece crackled to life. Martinez's voice was urgent. "Sir, they're accessing the building's blueprints. They'll find the passage network soon. And—" He hesitated. "Someone just accessed your private server. We're being hacked from inside your own security team." The revelation hit Gabriel like a physical blow. The power cut, the security override, the insider knowledge. They had a traitor in their midst, and now they were trapped underground, caught between Blackwood's men above and an unknown enemy within their own ranks. The sound of footsteps echoed through the passage behind them, growing closer. Gabriel made a split-second decision, pulling Adelaide and Emma into a maintenance alcove. His fingers found a hidden panel, revealing a digital interface. "My entire empire was built on being prepared," he whispered, typing rapidly on the keypad. "Every building I own has a ghost protocol, a way to disappear completely." The screen flickered with building schematics showing multiple red dots converging on their location. Adelaide shifted Emma to her other arm, her eyes fixed on the screen. "One of those dots is the traitor," she breathed. "Someone who knows all your escape routes." Her free hand clutched Gabriel's sleeve. "Thomas trusted the wrong person too. That's how they found him." The footsteps were getting closer. Gabriel's fingers flew across the keypad, initiating a series of commands. Suddenly, the passage lights began flashing in a synchronized pattern. "They're expecting us to go down," he murmured. "So, we're going up." A hidden ladder descended from the ceiling. Above them, a narrow shaft led upward into darkness. But before they could move, Adelaide grabbed Gabriel's wrist. "Why are you risking everything for us?" Her voice cracked. "Blackwood will destroy everything you've built." Gabriel's response was cut short by a voice echoing through the passage, one that made Adelaide's blood run cold. "Did you really think I wouldn't have every exit covered, Gabriel?" Malcolm Blackwood's smooth tones carried a hint of amusement. "Your security chief has been on my payroll for months. Martinez, why don't you tell them where they are?" The radio in Gabriel's ear crackled with static, then silence. His most trusted security chief had just betrayed them, and now they were trapped between two approaching forces in a concrete maze of their own making. 2 security cameras died simultaneously, their lights blinking out in the darkness. Gabriel grinned, a dangerous, knowing smile. "Martinez didn't know everything," he whispered. Reaching up, he pulled the ladder halfway down, letting it hang conspicuously. Then he pressed another hidden panel, revealing a second passage behind them. "Your husband's copy of the drive?" Gabriel murmured as they slipped into the new corridor. "Blackwood searching for it himself instead of sending men. Why?" Adelaide's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "The safe," she breathed. "Thomas said Blackwood keeps evidence against everyone who works for him. Insurance. But if someone accessed his safe—" She clutched Emma tighter. "The person who betrayed Thomas, they must be in those files too." The passage opened into a maintenance room filled with electrical panels. Gabriel moved quickly, pulling out his phone and connecting it to a hidden terminal. Security feeds flickered across the screen, showing Blackwood's men spreading through the building's secret network of corridors. But one feed caught his eye. Martinez wasn't heading toward them. The security chief was moving up toward Blackwood's private office 20 blocks away. "He's not just a traitor," Gabriel said softly. "He's playing both sides." His fingers flew across the phone's screen. "Every person has a price. That's what Blackwood always says at charity galas. But he forgot something crucial." He turned to Adelaide, his eyes hard with determination. "Sometimes the price isn't money." A distant explosion rocked the building. Emergency sirens blared anew. Above them they could hear Blackwood shouting orders, his cultivated calm finally cracking. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before they were discovered. But Gabriel wasn't running anymore. He had just figured out the one thing Malcolm Blackwood hadn't planned for. The maintenance room's door burst open, flooding the space with red emergency light. Gabriel pulled Adelaide and Emma behind a bank of electrical panels as Blackwood's voice rang out. Closer now, but tinged with something new. Desperation. "You think you've figured it out, haven't you, Gabriel?" Blackwood called. "But you're only seeing pieces of the game. Martinez isn't stealing from me. He's delivering something to me. Something your precious Adelaide doesn't even know she has." Emma whimpered softly, and Adelaide's face went white. Her hand unconsciously moved to the baby's blanket, to a small tear in the seam she'd carefully sewn shut weeks ago. Gabriel watched the gesture, his mind racing ahead to connect the dots. "Thomas didn't just make a copy," he whispered. "He split the evidence. One drive with financial records, another with names, and he hid one." His eyes fixed on the baby's blanket. "In the last place they'd look," Adelaide finished, her voice trembling. "With his newborn daughter. The night he died, he wasn't just saying goodbye, he was—" Her voice broke. He was making her a target. Gabriel's phone vibrated. A message from his secondary security team. Martinez had just entered Blackwood's building. The security chief thought he was about to trade Adelaide's secret for his own safety. But he didn't know about Gabriel's contingency plan, the one that was already in motion. "Your husband died protecting that evidence." Blackwood's voice grew closer. "Are you ready to do the same, Adelaide? To sacrifice your daughter's future for what? Justice?" He laughed softly. "There is no justice in our world, only power. And right now, you're running out of both time and options." Gabriel met Adelaide's eyes in the dim light. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to end Blackwood's reign, once and for all. But first, they had to spring the trap that would bring everything crashing down. The room plunged into complete darkness as Gabriel initiated the final phase of his plan. Emergency generators whined to a halt, plunging even Blackwood's men into blind confusion. In the pitch black, Gabriel's voice carried a deadly calm. "You're right about one thing, Malcolm. This world runs on power." Gabriel's hand found Adelaide's in the darkness, squeezing once their signal. "But you forgot where real power comes from." Flashlight's beam cut through the darkness as Blackwood's men swept the room. But Gabriel and Adelaide were already moving, sliding through a maintenance panel that only the building's architect would know existed. They emerged into a service elevator shaft, Gabriel helping Adelaide secure Emma as they began their ascent. "In 30 seconds, Gabriel whispered as they climbed, "Martinez will reach Blackwood safe. He'll find what he thinks is his salvation." But instead, his phone lit up with a message. Time seemed to slow as Adelaide read it. "FBI team in position. Operation initiated." Above them, they could hear Blackwood's furious voice echoing down the shaft. "Find them. They have to be here somewhere." But his words were drowned out by a new sound. Helicopters. Multiple ones, their searchlights cutting through the night sky. Thomas didn't just gather evidence of financial crimes, Adelaide breathed, realization dawning. The names in his files. They were connected to something bigger, weren't they? Something that would bring in federal agencies. "Human trafficking," Gabriel confirmed grimly. Blackwood's real estate empire was a front. And Martinez, he wasn't just any corrupt cop. He was Blackwood's connection to a federal task force. The building trembled as multiple breaching charges detonated simultaneously several floors above them. The endgame had begun, but they weren't safe yet, because Malcolm Blackwood had one last card to play, and he was about to prove why he was considered the most dangerous man in New York. The service shaft filled with the echo of breaking glass and shouting voices. Through gaps in the walls, they could see tactical teams rappelling down the building's exterior. But Gabriel's attention was fixed on something else, a shadow moving rapidly down the shaft toward them. "He's coming!" Adelaide gasped, clutching Emma tighter. The baby, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, remained eerily silent. Gabriel pulled them onto a maintenance platform just as Blackwood's voice cut through the chaos closer than ever. "Did you think federal agents would save you?" Blackwood's laugh echoed metallically in the shaft. "I own half of them. The other half—" A gunshot rang out, the bullet sparking off metal inches from their position. "They won't live long enough to testify." But Gabriel was smiling in the darkness. "You're slipping, Malcolm. Getting sloppy." His voice carried upward. "You've spent so long being untouchable you forgot to check what I've been building right under your nose. 3 years of my own investigation. Every shell company, every bribed official, every disappeared witness. All documented." A sudden silence fell, broken only by the distant sound of helicopters. When Blackwood spoke again, his voice had lost its smooth confidence. "You're bluffing. You're a real estate developer, nothing more." "Tell him," Gabriel said softly to Adelaide. "Tell him what Thomas really gave you that night." Adelaide's voice shook but grew stronger with each word. "The drive in Emma's blanket? It's a decoy. The real evidence is already in the hands of every major news outlet in the country. Thomas didn't just document your crimes, he documented your entire network. Right now, your empire isn't just falling, Malcolm. It's being erased." The shaft filled with the sound of multiple doors bursting open. Flashlight beams crisscrossed the darkness as FBI tactical teams swarmed in. But in that final moment, Blackwood made his desperate move, and no one could have predicted what happened next. A single gunshot echoed through the shaft, followed by the sickening sound of metal groaning. The maintenance platform beneath them shuddered violently. Blackwood had shot through its support cable. They had seconds before it gave way completely. "Give me Emma!" Gabriel shouted, reaching for the baby. Adelaide passed her over just as the platform lurched sideways. In one fluid motion, Gabriel pressed the infant safely against his chest and grabbed Adelaide's hand with his free arm, pulling them toward a service door mere feet away. They swung through the doorway as the platform collapsed behind them, taking Blackwood's furious roar with it into the darkness below. But their relief was short-lived. The corridor they'd entered was already filling with smoke. Blackwood's final insurance policy. The building's fire suppression system had been compromised. "He's burning everything down," Adelaide coughed, stumbling forward. "If he can't have his empire—" "He'll bury us all in its ashes," Gabriel finished grimly, leading them through the thickening smoke. Emma began to cry, her tiny wails echoing through the burning corridor. Behind them, they could hear multiple explosions rocking the building's foundation. They reached a sealed security door, their last barrier to safety. Gabriel punched in his override code, but the keypad remained dark. The power was completely cut. Through the reinforced glass, they could see FBI agents evacuating the building, their flashlights growing dimmer as smoke filled every available space. Then, through the haze, a figure emerged. Malcolm Blackwood stood at the corridor's end, his pristine suit now covered in dust, a gun trained steadily on them. His face, lit by the emergency lights, showed no trace of the refined businessman. This was the real Malcolm Blackwood, a cornered animal ready to take everyone down with him. "If I burn," he snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger, "you burn with me." Time slowed to a crawl. Gabriel's body moved on instinct, shielding Adelaide and Emma as Blackwood's finger squeezed the trigger, but the shot never came. Instead, a deafening explosion rocked the corridor from behind Blackwood. The blast threw him forward, the gun clattering from his grip as Martinez emerged from the smoke. "It's over, Malcolm," Martinez called out, his FBI badge glinting in the emergency lights. "Did you really think I was that easy to buy? Every conversation, every threat, every bribe, I recorded it all. For 3 years, I played your faithful servant while building the case that would destroy you." Blackwood lunged for his fallen gun, but another explosion rocked the building. Part of the ceiling collapsed between him and his weapon. The flames were getting closer, the smoke thicker. Through the chaos, Gabriel spotted a maintenance tool mounted on the wall, a heavy metal wrench. "The door!" Martinez shouted, rushing to them. "The manual override hit it hard enough and it'll disengage." Gabriel grabbed the wrench, smashing it against the door's control panel. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th strike, the locks disengaged with a heavy clang. As the door swung open, Blackwood's enraged scream cut through the smoke. He charged toward them, past the falling debris, his face contorted with murderous fury. But he never reached them. The weakened floor beneath his feet gave way, and Malcolm Blackwood, the man who had built an empire on others' suffering, disappeared into the inferno of his own making. His final scream echoed through the burning building, swallowed by the roar of collapsing concrete and steel. Martinez pushed them through the door just as the corridor behind them collapsed. They emerged into the cold night air, surrounded by FBI agents and emergency responders. Emma's cries joined the wail of sirens as Adelaide clutched her daughter, breathing in the clean winter air. The nightmare was over, but as Gabriel watched Adelaide comfort their child, he knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. 10 months later, the Manhattan skyline gleamed under a warm autumn sun. From Gabriel's new office overlooking Central Park, the rebuilt tower stood as a testament to change. The morning papers on his desk carried the final headline in the Blackwood saga: "Last of trafficking ringleaders sentenced, victims find justice." Adelaide stood by the window, Emma balanced on her hip. The baby, now a toddler, had her mother's eyes and an infectious laugh that filled the room. Gone were the shadows of fear that had haunted Adelaide's face that winter night. In their place was a quiet strength, earned through survival and justice. "The last safe house opened today," Adelaide said softly, turning to face Gabriel. She'd channeled her experience into creating a foundation for trafficking survivors, turning her pain into purpose. 20 women have a new chance at life. Gabriel crossed the room, gathering both of them into his arms. The gold band on his finger caught the sunlight matching the one Adelaide wore. Not a replacement for the past, but a promise for the future. "You gave them more than a chance," he murmured. "You gave them hope." Emma reached for Gabriel's face, her tiny fingers patting his cheek. The gesture still amazed him, how this little girl who had survived so much could trust so completely. Through her, he'd learned that true power wasn't in buildings or bank accounts, but in the ability to protect those who needed it most. The city stretched out before them, no longer a place of shadows and secrets, but of possibilities. Sometimes, Gabriel thought, love stories don't end where you expect. Sometimes they take you through darkness to find a greater light. Adelaide leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Gabriel smiled, watching Emma drift off to sleep in her mother's arms. That some things are worth burning down empires for. Yes, let me add that style of outro after the epilogue, after the previous ending. Emma reached for Gabriel's face, her tiny fingers patting his cheek. The gesture still amazed him, how this little girl who had survived so much could trust so completely. Through her, he'd learned that true power wasn't in buildings or bank accounts, but in the ability to protect those who needed it most. The city stretched out before them, no longer a place of shadows and secrets, but of possibilities. Sometimes, Gabriel thought, love stories don't end where you expect. Sometimes they take you through darkness to find a greater light. Adelaide leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Gabriel smiled, watching Emma drift off to sleep in her mother's arms. That some things are worth burning down empires for. Can a single moment of courage change the course of multiple lives? Have you ever stood up for someone when everyone else looked away? Share your story of unexpected heroism in the comments below. This tale of redemption, love, and justice reminds us that our past doesn't define our future. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone in their struggles. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is reach out to someone who's falling. Click the screen now to discover another story that will remind you why second chances are the universe's greatest gift. Until next time, keep believing in the power of transformation.